With the trade deadline fast approaching, the Sharks trade talks are intensifying as multiple names have been linked in trade talks, including Nico Sturm, Luke Kunin, the physical, grinding bottom six player, and Mario Ferraro. There's a lot of rumors coming out recently with some interesting teams linked to the Sharks. We got to dive into all the latest rumors coming up on this episode of Sharks Digest. But guys, as a reminder, like we always remind you, I know we remind you every video, but still 69% of you watching this video are not subscribed, and we have Sharks content all season long, all the latest news, rumors, reports. This is your home for it. Hit the free subscribe button down below if you want to stay up to date. Mark, there's a lot we got to get into in this video, and there's a lot of names that have come up, and on the fourth period recently, via Dave Pagnotta, they've been talking about a lot of things, and a recent article said this. We'll link it down below. Forwards Luke Kunin and Nico Sturm are playing on expiring contracts and are eligible to become UFAs on July 1st. The Sharks have made both players available, and both are considered prime candidates to be moved by March 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, this is not necessarily brand new news that these guys have been linked in trade talks, but as we're now just about a week away from the trade deadline, these talks have been intensifying, especially around these pending UFAs on the Sharks. We'll get to Ferraro in just a bit, as he does have an extra year on his contract, of course, but let's start with Nico Sturm. Nico Sturm is one of those guys that's going to be a solid bottom six guy for a lot of contenders, Mark. I know you're quite a fan of Nico Sturm, as I think a lot of us are. He's a solid face-off guy. He does, his point production's not amazing this year, but for what he brings in that bottom six and for what he can maybe net in return, this does seem like maybe the prime candidate for the Sharks to move on from at this deadline.
And the biggest thing is, looking at Nico Sturm, we were looking at his faceoff percentage over 60% as a fourth liner. This guy would fill out a bottom six in a contender, probably more of a fourth liner on a contending team. I'm not sure the exact value. I think you can definitely get back a fourth or a fifth, or maybe a B-level prospect if they want to take the chance. But the biggest thing is this contract is very easily acquirable by a contending team. This is the last year. He's a UFA at the end of the year, $2 million. He is 30 at the end of it. This is the player that I actually would not mind coming back to the Sharks as a free agent this offseason if he does go on to a new team. But I think Nico Sturm's going to be quite interesting, where we're going to see a lot of players, especially bottom six defensive guys with good faceoffs. Jake Evans from the Montreal Canadiens is the name that's going to be flying around. So if a team misses out on someone like that, I could see not a huge bidding war, but maybe a small bidding war starting on someone like Nico Sturm, where teams are really looking to solidify their bottom six, fourth line guy that can play the penalty kill, win you faceoffs in clutch moments. I don't know if you feel the same, Josh, but I would not be shocked if they got maybe a fourth and another small pick back for Nico Sturm.
It's hard to say, right? Like, the closer we get to the deadline, the more we'll know about what the market for that type of center is going to be. I mean, there's a lot of these bottom six guys floating around. Like you mentioned, Jake Evans, even a guy like Trent Frederick from the Boston Bruins. It's like, there's a lot of interesting names going around, but Nico Sturm, again, while he's not going to give you that kind of crazy offensive production, he has some size. He doesn't use his size every single night, but he is capable of it. And he's 6'3". He wins faceoffs, like you said, at a crazy clip this year. Like, I don't know if you guys realize, like 60% is kind of insane. I know it's not a crazy high volume or anything, but he's one of those guys you can trust to take a defensive zone faceoff if you need him to, or a clutch offensive zone faceoff at, some moment in the game. So I think there is going to be some market for him. Now, I'm not saying teams are going to be offering a first or second for Nico Sturm. Just like you said, I mean, it's just not going to happen with his production. He's not the kind of guy you're going to want to ride for 14, 15 minutes a night. Far from it. But he is a guy who can make an impact, especially for a playoff push. And hey, size is always desirable around the NHL. But, it's not just him when it comes to bottom six guys that the Sharks have up to offer. We got to talk about Luke Kunin, too. Now, Kunin is having a solid year goal scoring wise. I mean, he's on pace to get up near 20 goals this year. We'll see how close he gets to it. But even if he gets 15, 16, that's not bad. But the big thing with Kunin is he's physical, he's gritty. He is playing over 15 minutes a night for the Sharks this year. And, while he doesn't really have that, face-off pedigree that Nico Sturm has, Kunin's going to be playing the wing for you, or center, I suppose. But Luke Kunin is one of those guys that is really going to be that playoff type of performer, that guy in your bottom six that you really, really, really want to rely on to just go out, punish other players right now. So, 6 foot, 196 is a center. The cap hit is a bit higher. That 1 year deal, 2.75, a bit harder to fit. And without a retention spot from the Sharks, it's going to be harder to get a decent return for him. I don't think you're going to find many other teams who are going to kind of broker that deal. But again, if there are some contending teams who have deadline space, whether it's from LTIR space or what have you, And this kind of guy, that kind of grit in the bottom six is something teams are always looking for come playoff time.
And the biggest thing is, listen, the Sharks aren't the most explosive offensive team, but Kunin having 11 goals, being physical, a big body that's going to throw. We've seen in the intro video, he will fight for you. This is a guy that I think could be a sneaky pickup for another contending team, as you have someone with the potential to score 20 goals on a third line. If they do bring him in on a contending team, this is where I think the value might be a little higher. Maybe you get a third round pick, especially if Kunin can get the goal scoring up a tiny bit between now and next Friday when we go into the deadline. But looking at this, we've seen Mike Grier say time after time, they're not going to trade players just for picks for no reason. They need to make the right deal. We've seen it with Mackenzie Blackwood. We see this team making deals that make sense and almost offers they can't say no to. I can't see them going out and saying, hey, take Luke Kunin for a seventh or take Sturm for a seventh. But I do think if the right deal comes around, if this is maybe a third, a fourth, maybe a fourth and something else, I could see the Sharks doing this. And with the way they've been drafting, I wouldn't be shocked if they went out and got a steal in the draft at one of these picks.
Yeah, like the draft situation right now is looking unbelievable. I mean, if you just look at their draft pick situation, but look, we know the Sharks are going to be one of the bottom teams in the league this year. They're going to have an incredibly good pick. There's a lot of talk around who they can maybe draft. Matthew Schaefer, of course, is the guy that I think a lot of us fans really want them to take. But when you're shipping out a guy like Kunin, again, you're probably shooting for that third or fourth. Is that really going to be possible? At a near 3 million cap hit, you start to wonder. And again, it also, once again, depends on other teams. I mean, Kunin's played a lot more center this year. He's played a lot more winger in the past. Their team's going to want him. He's well below 50% on the faceoff dot. They're going to want him at center on the wing. Is he going to be that 13th forward? It all depends on which teams are in on him. Same thing with Nico Sturm, and it depends what those teams have to give up. But again, great point that you made saying Mike Grier is not just going to trade this guy for nothing, right? We're not going to trade our assets just to get some middling pick. But the Sharks have some very, very good, well, some solid draft history in the last little while. Cheryshav's looking amazing. And coming up this year, we got 2 first-round picks already, not to mention 3 picks in the first 2 rounds next year. So even bolstering like that 3rd-round pick next year or in 2027 and maybe a 5th here and there, like these kind of things are valuable long-term. So very interesting stuff coming around there. But the last guy we got to talk about that could get some value is Mario Ferraro. And once again, via the 4th period, teams have inquired about some of San Jose's other players, including defenseman Mario Ferraro, who has another year remaining on his contract after this season. Now, he is the highest cap hit of these 3 players we've talked about. He actually has identical offensive production numbers to Nico Sturm, which I find kind of funny. But Mario Ferraro is a guy that's played over 20 minutes a night for the Sharks here. I think on a better team, he's better suited to a bottom 4 role. I think he could really fill in that role quite well. Look, 122 hits, 86 block shots. Not having a horrible season. I know some Sharks fans. Let us know your thoughts on Ferraro, because I know a lot of us are split on whether we want him to stick around or move him, or is he good or not. But he is the type of guy that at his cap hit, he can very much be worth that cap hit, if not more, to the right suitor. And I think he could absolutely bring in some decent trade returns. Mark, if you're the Sharks, do you think he is a truly viable piece to move out? Are you fine moving on from Ferraro? Because personally, I absolutely am. And I think the price that he might fetch might even be higher than some people are expecting. Like, this is the kind of guy all kinds of good teams are going to want in their bottom 4 pairings.
Yeah, because the biggest thing is we see a lot of general managers not really want to take on rentals. I mean, looking at the Carolina situation and the Rantanen, rentals can get tricky. So bringing in a guy that can play a shutdown role on your 2nd pairing, on your 3rd pairing, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's $3.25 million this season and
so, yeah.
next year. I do think this is going to be an intriguing piece for a lot of contending teams. You can bring him in, only 26 years old. As you said, not going to go out and put up offensive numbers, same stats as Nico Sturm, which once again, quite funny. But looking at the fact he put up 11 points on the Sharks team, only 26 years old, he blocks a ton of shots, he will throw hits. The biggest thing I look at this, the Sharks can't run 6 defensemen that are all rookies. I know you have Vlasic, a couple of guys that are up in age, but I do like the fit of Ferraro on this team long-term as maybe a 3rd pairing defenseman or a 4th defenseman on this team. But if a team calls and says, hey, we'll give you a late 1st-round pick, maybe another pick. I mean, we've seen the cap space going into this trade deadline. They could take on a bad contract. So if a team calls and says, hey, we'll give you a 1st-round pick, maybe a bad contract, and a prospect for Mario Ferraro, I don't think I could say no to that offer.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. Like the Sharks cap space right now, again, like we've seen moves like the Wallman move, like we were talking about before the video, like taking on certain undesirable pieces from other teams in exchange for some kind of asset, whether it be a prospect or a draft pick, is something the Sharks are very much in a position to do. They can bolster their draft capital. We can add in, however much money. But I want to also say that, like, to me, that's conditional on if bringing in like an undesirable piece. Like, let's say it's a good player, but on a contract that's way too big. There's a lot of those in the NHL. Would that player really want to play top 6 minutes or middle six on the Sharks? Like, I would only want to take on a guy if it would truly be the opportunity to showcase their skills in San Jose without affecting the chemistry of the team right now. Because we're seeing a lot of guys start to improve, and young guys getting into their groove. And I don't want to mess that up, right? That's kind of the big thing for me. But Mark, like, I guess one final thing now, looking at the Sharks moving forward, I'm thinking at least one or two moves are going to be done, but I think the flexibility for them just makes it likely that they'll make some move like that, like you said. But again, taking on some salary for another draft pick, to me, that seems like a move that Grier might have to do if the opportunity presents himself. And I know Ferraro, like, he's gained interest from contenders, even like a team like Colorado, so there might even be a bidding war for him.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, and I want to make it very clear, I would not take on a bad contract per se on a 3+ year deal. If it's
No,
this
no, no.
year and next year, sure, why not? We've seen Wallman join this team from Detroit. They got a second or a third round pick for him. Wallman looks great offensively. This is a player that could be traded next year. But the biggest thing is you could take on some extra bad contracts. This is a team that might start trying to contend in 2027. So if you can bolster some draft picks in 2026, 2027, this just makes it easier for Mike Grier to not only draft more players to add to this, to make this a deeper Sharks team, but you also get more draft capital. So once you get to that point, maybe you go out and say, hey, let's make a big splash. Let's go out and trade for this player or that player to add to this team to make them jump from a bottom team, which is really hard to say, but we know they're going to get a top pick this year, to what it might take to be a wildcard team going into the playoffs.
I'm excited to see what's going on over the next couple of years, right? The moves that are going to be made coming up to this deadline, this offseason, the draft. There's so much to be excited about, but we want to hear what you guys have to say. Are we right? Are we really wrong? Let us know down below. We love hearing from you guys on all these Sharks trade talks. That'll do it for this episode of Sharks Digest. But once again, if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel. We got all kinds of Sharks news coming up all season and off season long. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Mark Pye. We'll catch you in the next one.